Guys, good afternoon or morning, whenever you're watching this. I'm with Alison Reeves, who is the bid writer, and we're going to talk about bids and copywriting things today. So, Alison, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. My name's Alison Reeves. I'm known as the bid writer, and I write bids and tenders, proposals, grant funding, all that sort of thing for my clients. I also do copywriting. That's another area of my business, and I tend to write things like web copy and blog posts and LinkedIn profiles and all this sort of thing. So it's basically anything to do with the business that you'd need to write down for that business and present. That's what I do.
Brilliant. How did you get into it then, Alison? What started you off?
Well, I always say to people, I was the child who really enjoyed writing thank you letters. And I've always had a bit of a passion for stationery and fountain pens, and I've also had a passion for reading. And when I sort of got old enough to work, I sort of fell into my first job, which was called management services. And it was about sort of managing lots of things. But one of the things we did was time and motion study. And that's quite an old-fashioned term, but what it basically means is you record a policy or a process that somebody's going through repetitively usually, and then you document that carefully, and then you analyse it and rewrite it and then train them in how to do it better. And I did this for some time, and I've really enjoyed it, and it led on to me doing a lot of policy and procedure writing and all those sort of things. And then sort of a little bit more recently, in the sort of 90s, I was working for a company, and they asked me if I'd like to do my marketing degree, because I was working for the marketing department at the time. And I did sort of night school, and I got my marketing degree because I said if I passed, they'd pay for it. So that was a good incentive. And what happened as a result of that is I later went freelance, and I sort of combined the skills, if you like. So, when I think about bids and proposals and tenders and grant applications and all those sort of things, they can be technical. They need to be very factual, but they also need to sell the idea or the product or the service that you're selling. So it's a marriage, if you like, between what I would call technical writing and marketing, like sales and marketing, so to speak.
Yeah, I've never actually thought of it that way, because when you think about bid writing or tenders and things, you tend to think that you just have to put the actual facts down, as you say. I think a lot of people, they obviously, I certainly feel like that now, that I wouldn't have looked at it from a marketing perspective. I would have just, because I did tenders and things on MOD contracts many years ago. It was literally all numbers and figures. But actually, I've never really thought. But actually, the writing part of it, you do actually have to sell your business, don't you? You have to really appeal to them.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the tender a little bit, but most of them have. I tend to work on what I call the quality questions. So there's a lot of questions in a tender that are sort of, what's your company name, what's your business company number, what's your VAT number. It's all factual. Have you got these things in place? But there's also questions like how do you add value, and they basically want to know how you're going to introduce your product or service to their business, how you're going to manage it, and also what the outcome is. And the thing is that when you do any of these documents, you are competing with other people to a greater or lesser degree. There's always a number of other people trying to get that business. So effectively, you have to demonstrate why you're the best choice. And that comes into all the marketing stuff about the benefits and all those sorts of things. There's various stages to a tender as well, and the last stage, which is optional, is very often where you go in to meet the company around the table and do a little presentation, and people call that the beauty parade. And the reason they do that is because that's the bit where they figure out who they've got the best chemistry with, who they feel they can work best with. So it's still down to the sales in terms of like, know and trust. And I always say to people, if they've got a little bit of a relationship with a business before they start writing the bids and tenders, they've got a much better chance of winning it. But also there's a lot of caveats around that, obviously. I mean, just because you've been working with somebody doesn't mean the person who's marking the tender knows you. So you've still got to be very thorough. But there are techniques to answering the questions that can get more marks.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I suppose it's something that we all look at and dread and go, oh, I've got to write a whole load of stuff here. I know when I look at a form, I will go and find something else to do. So if I have to fill it, I'm sure there's something else I could be doing.
Fortunately for me, there's a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
No, but and I mean, it is a challenge sometimes. I mean, I've done tenders that are anything from sort of 4 or 5 questions right up. I mean, I did one as part of a group, actually, where they had 700 questions to answer. And that was for a very big contract for a big corporate company. And I was working alongside other people in their company doing that. So it can be very varied, but it's ever so interesting because you learn so much about businesses. I mean, I've got some clients who have been with me a little while now, and I know their businesses really well. So I can sort of do 80-90% of a tender before they even look at it. So if they say to me, Alison, I found this tender I'd like to go for, what do you think? I do a quote for them, tell them how much it's going to cost me to do it, and I calculate that based on how much time I think it's going to take me. And then once I get the go-ahead, I tend to go ahead and write most of that because I know them. And then we just add the extra little bits at the end, say if they've done site visits and there's particular things we pull out and put in there. Obviously, if it's a new client, then I have to spend a lot more time talking to them and getting under the skin of their business. But once I've done that,
this where the copy side of it comes in, because you are basically, not basically, there's no basic about it, but you are a copywriter. You are, it's like you said, you do obviously the blog writing things. So that comes into it because you're creating a story about the business.
Yes, it is. And I think it's a blend of skills, to be honest with you. A copywriter, there's not that many of us about compared to copy. I mean, there's loads of copywriters around me. Just writing into Google and you can tell that. But I think it's because as a bid writer, you're dealing with much more technical stuff. So, for example, I could be dealing with valves on a submarine for a defence industry submission, or I could be dealing with an IT type software project, or I could just be dealing with somebody who wants to get some grounds maintenance contracts or cleaning contracts. Or I've got a couple of very, very small businesses, and they submit to the council for things like, when they convert people's bathrooms where they're not very mobile and they turn them into wet rooms. And basically, they just want to get on to what's called a framework with the council, so they get the opportunity to do those jobs. So, I mean, it's so varied. It's very interesting. I mean, I think you need a lot of skills to be a bid writer, because you need to be able to do the copywriting, you need to be able to understand marketing, and you need to be able to understand the technical side of businesses as well. And some of that, I think, actually comes with experience to a degree.
So how are you finding things? Obviously, we're in the middle of the COVID-19 virus at the moment. This is obviously going to go out a bit later in May, but it's we'll probably still be in lockdown at this rate. How is it affecting things for people at the moment?
Well, from my perspective, it's had a big effect, because most of the big tenders, or most of the stuff that would normally be coming through, has been put off till at least the end of June. So initially I was like, oh dear, everything's fallen off a cliff. And also the other sort of side to my business, in a sense, is the training. I go out and train people. I do a lot of bids and bid writing training, but I also do business skills training. Well, of course, all training has stopped. And although people are at home and have a bit more time, people don't actually want to spend a lot of money at the moment. They're sort of, even if they have money, they're sort of like, well, I don't know how long this is going to have to last me, so I don't want to sort of splurge out and rewrite the whole website and then think, oh, I'm here for another 6 months. But what I have found is I have been doing quite a few grant applications, funding applications of different kinds, because although the commercial side of things have gone quiet, there's still a lot of organisations out there with grants and funding, not just coronavirus related, but other types of funding as well. I think there's one big one closed on last Friday, for example, where the government, it's an innovation project, and they had about £20 million to give out to people in chunks. Obviously, they don't give that much to everybody. There's a limit to how much they give to each person. But they, sometimes those are related to the current situation. Like some of them were related to, how could you spend this money in an innovative way to help people? And this is over and above any sort of grants or application. I mean, I've got one person I'm just doing something for, and he does cleaning type jobs. Things like, carpet cleaning and stuff like that. Well, he can't do any of that at the moment, theoretically, really. But he's applying for one of these loans with the banks, and he's been asked to write a business plan, and he hasn't got a clue where to start.
Oh, right.
So I'm sort of helping him do that, So there's those sort of bits of work. And of course, like everybody else, I'm busy doing all the jobs that I always said I've got time to do on my website, and setting things up that I have been on my list forever. So it is what it is. You have to make the best of these things, don't you?
So what sort of tips would you give people at the moment, when they're looking at things, and maybe they're looking at doing a bit of copy around their business, or maybe even they're thinking about blogging, during, this lovely time?
Well, first of all, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was I've got something here. I mean, you won't be able to read it from here, but it's like a checklist, and it's a tender ready checklist, and it's basically when you go for a tender of any kind or a proposal, very often they want to know that you've got certain things in place, certain types of information and policies and procedures and stuff like that. And this is a great time because one of my services that I offer is being tender ready. So getting your business ready to tender, having everything in place that you need. Now's a good time to do that. And I've got a little checklist if anybody wants it. I'm happy to send it to them. Basically, you can actually just get all those things ready yourself. If you want to do updates to your website, there's loads of tips I could give you, but it's things like, be natural. If you want to attract people to your web page, just talk naturally to them as you would. Identify who your target market is, talk to them, but always prepare all your documents for your website in Word first, if you can. The reason I say that is because Word has lots of really good spelling and grammar features. A lot of people will try and use things like Grammarly, for example, but you don't really need it if you've got a copy of Word, because it has it all built in. And learn how to use those things so that they pick up some of the typos and the grammar and the punctuation and all those sort of things. The reason I say that is because if somebody reads your website and you're not very articulate, what tends to happen is they tend to assume you're the same in everything you do. So although you might give a fantastic service that might be even for example, I don't know, carpet cleaning, just because you're a good carpet cleaner doesn't mean you're going to be good at writing. But if your writing is dreadful, then people might question your carpet cleaning abilities.
Yeah, I never thought of that, to be fair.
Yeah, we do have, and it's unfair really, because we shouldn't expect everybody to be good at everything. I mean, that's where people like I come in. And some of my clients who aren't, who don't have a lot of money, one of the things I tend to do is like an editing and proofreading service. So they'll write it and they've got control of it. And then I just check it for them and do like a check to make sure, hopefully you can't hear the dog in the background. So, I'll check grammar, punctuation, make sure it reads nicely. I won't change the tone of it, but so I would say just get stuck in and write a few things. And if you're really, really struggling, you can always, I'm not the only copywriter in town, there's loads of them about. Get somebody to check it over, even if it's somebody in the family, or a friend or a colleague that you can send it to, and just get it sense checked. But I must admit, when I did my website, some of the bits, and I also wrote my book and things, I got my mum reading it all the time, because my mum is very hot on grammar for some reason. and I actually, if I do something now like that, I will actually send it to her and say, Mum, can you just read this for me? Yeah,
because I
yeah.
think we look at it so much, we don't see our own mistakes. I even look at some of my content that goes out sometimes and think, oh, I didn't check that one. So,
Well, we all make mistakes, and it's the same with social media, isn't it? I mean, I make mistakes myself, because I'll read something on social media and I'll go to respond to it, and I'm really I'm not thinking about the words and the typing, I'm thinking about my thoughts, if you like. And then afterwards I think, oh, blimey, I didn't notice. And of course with predictive text as well.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm all forever going back and editing stuff on social media instead of thinking about it. But then again, on social media, think about it too much, it's gone, hasn't it? The moment's passed.
Yeah, you start overthinking and over grammatising.
Yeah, it is a good time to get lots of things done. Review your social media profiles so that they reflect what you do now, and all of those. There's lots of things that people can do that can put them in a good place when we come back to work. And I just think it's a great opportunity to sit back and think about these things and mull them over. And
it is actually.
Yeah.
It definitely is. And it's interesting what you said about Word, because I must admit I'm guilty of using Grammarly, but only purely because I didn't realise that Word had it was that powerful tool that I could use like that. I do write in Word.
I had a bit of a run-in with Grammarly, actually, because I downloaded it and it wasn't too bad on my PC, but on my laptop it slowed it down terribly. I had all sorts of problems. I took it off in the end, and I did find that it wasn't any, and even though I had it set to UK, there was still a few US things creep through. They haven't perfected the UK grammar and punctuation. I don't personally, but then again, I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to that. But if you look in a Word under the review, the ribbon at the top of Word, and you go to the review ribbon, so you select review and it brings up a different ribbon, and then one of the options on that ribbon, I think it's towards the left, is a spelling and grammar checker. And you can actually set the language. There's a language button. You press the language button and you can make sure your document is set to UK English, not US English.
Right.
And then you can actually go in and run the spell checker, and it will bring up things. It will bring up a number of things depending on how you set it, because you can actually go into the back end of Word in the options and you can set up grammar rules and all those sort of things as well.
Oh, right.
So you can ask it to tell you when you make certain mistakes, if you like.
Yeah.
What I would recommend is just, everything's on YouTube these days. I'm sure there's a YouTube video that talks about those things. But if not, maybe it's time I made one. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe you should make one. No, that'd be good, because I didn't even. I know it does a bit of spell check, but I didn't realise it was a powerful.
No, it'll do it all. It'll check your grammar, punctuation, grammar. It will even check for things like clarity, where you're not being very concise. It will tell you.
All right.
And it will offer alternatives. Some of them are okay, but you just have to use your head really as to which ones you go for. But they're not bad. They're pretty good, and they put your mind in the right place to sort of give another alternative. And you've got your built-in thesaurus and all those sort of things as well. So if you've used the word ensure 3 times in a paragraph.
My pet hate is a Z. When Grammarly suggests a Z instead of an S, things like prioritise, I think, no, it's an S.
Well, I can tell you a whole story around that, but just very briefly. The Z obviously is the Latin derivative of the word, and when people populated America, they took the language that we spoke at the time, which was the Latin derivative, which was a Z, and then we took on what's called the French derivative, so we use the S spelling. Now, about some years ago now, the Oxford English Dictionary, that Word bases the algorithm for spelling and punctuation and stuff on, they changed the preferred spelling to the Z rather than the S, so we have the Oxford English Dictionary to blame for that.
I didn't know that.
You can actually add to dictionary the S's. But what I do, I'll be honest with you, what I do is I get to the end of the document. I don't type with a Z, I type with an S. But sometimes if you've got bits and pieces of things people have cut and pasted into documents, you can't always control everything that's in there if it's a big document. So I just do a find on Z, because there's not that many words that use Z in spelling, and I just do a find on Z, and then I go through and edit them, and it only takes a few, 5-10 minutes at the most.
That's interesting, because that is one of my pet hates.
Yeah. It's a bit like, I mean, there's loads of them. It's things like how many spaces after a full stop. You know, there isn't actually a right answer. It's a question of choice. But people will argue to the ends of the earth as to which one is the right one. But all I say to people, because I find different companies have adopted different like style guidelines with things like that. So I usually try and find out what they prefer. But it's easily remedied, and as long as you're consistent, that's the most important thing. If you're consistently using one or the other, then it's fine.
Well, this has been really interesting. Thank you so much for this.
It's a pleasure.
So where can people find you then, Alison? Where are you?
Well, the easiest place to find me actually is at thebidwriter.com, which is my bid writing website. But if you put my name into Facebook or LinkedIn, you'll find me, and I'd be more than happy to connect with anybody. And you can find all my contact details on my website as well. So you can find my number and my email address and all those sort of things. So if anybody wants to talk to me or get a copy of their tender ready checklist or any other checklists that might be useful too, then just get in touch.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it.
I've enjoyed chatting. It's been good fun.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.